Well, time now for the campaign beat, our daily roundup of the news from the French presidential election campaign trail. Florence Villeminot joins me. Flo, things definitely went up a notch yesterday. Both Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen visiting the Whirlpool factory in the north of France. That's set to shut down when it moved to Poland, and yesterday it was at the heart of a media storm.
The media have actually dubbed it the Battle of Amiens, the moment when the gloves really came off in this presidential campaign. Now, initially, this was an opportunity for Emmanuel Macron to kickstart the second part of his campaign. Leading up to round two, he'd scheduled a meeting with worker representatives at the Chamber of Commerce in Amiens, but he was really one-upped by Marine Le Pen, who stole his thunder. You can see her here. She staged essentially a surprise visit to the factory, much to the delight of the workers there. You can see them taking selfies and doing la bise to her. And she stayed for about 15 minutes, so not very long. But she did make a lot of promises in those 15 minutes. She promised to keep the factory open. And of course, she took the opportunity to swing out at her ravel.
I've come to see workers who are the victims of the economic policies defended by Mr. Macron. He's meeting a couple of carefully selected people in a well-protected hall at the Chamber of Commerce. It's two ways of seeing things and two ways of acting. Stay strong. You are the pride of all those in France who are working and those who have lost their jobs because of this economic policy.
Well, Flo, not to be outdone, Macron also visited the factory shortly after Marine, but he didn't receive such a warm welcome.
Not so much at first. He was greeted with booing and chants of Marine Président, but he didn't surrender. And he also spoke to workers. He spent an hour and a half talking to these striking workers. And at the end, it seemed like some had listened to him. Some shook his hand at the end of his stay there. So analysts say that he actually managed to pull off what was quite a tricky gamble, quite a thorny situation for him. It certainly pumped him up, that's for sure. You can just listen to him later in the day speaking at a rally in Arras, where he also tackled his rival.
We will not give in. They will not go through. I don't want that. All those who have decided to be the sleepwalkers of the 21st century, shame on them. We're standing strong, we're moving forward, and we will hold on until the end, responsibly. But I want something else from my country. Not that. Not that.
Right, well, Flo, yesterday's surprise face-off may have spiced up the campaign, if you will, but it hasn't convinced all voters. Some attempted not to go to the ballot boxes at all.
It's really interesting. Before round one, we were talking about undecided voters, and before round two, we're talking about voters who are tempted by abstaining in the second round. In round one, the abstention rate was about 23%. That figure really could climb in the runoff. Ellen Gainsford tells us more in this package.
With only 11 days to go until the second round of the French election, the spectre of abstention is looming. Here in Marseille, some voters are making the decision to choose neither candidate.
We don't agree with either candidate. Basically, we'll abstain.
There'll be lots of blank ballots, I think.
A sentiment that's been trending on Twitter. The hashtag Sans moi le 7 mai, without me on May 7th, has been used more than 200,000 times. Far-left candidate Jean-Luc who was defeated in the first round of voting, has surprised many by refusing to endorse either candidate. Instead, asking his supporters' opinion, using an online survey.
Option 1, I vote with a blank ballot. Option 2, I vote for Macron. Option 3, I abstain.
While the right-wing Les Républicains party and even former President Nicolas Sarkozy have called for their supporters to vote for Emmanuel Macron in the second round. But not everyone's pleased with this advice.
We don't have to follow them. We're old enough to make our own decisions, to know who we want to vote for.
In the final days of their campaign, Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron will have to keep battling for every vote.
Well, Flo, that report mentioned there that the far-left candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he came in fourth in round one, drawing some 7 million votes. That's a lot to give away.
And Mélenchon has drawn a lot of criticism for not endorsing Macron, or at least telling his voters to block the far-right National Front, especially because in 2002, when Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, made it to round two against Jacques Chirac, he was very vocal about the fact that voters should block the far right. Listen to him in 2002 and listen to his voters today. They're divided as to what to do.
On May the 5th, you shouldn't hesitate. Wear gloves, hold your nose or whatever, but vote. It's important to keep Le Pen as low as possible.
I'm going to vote against the National Front. I can't vote for them because of my values and what I want for France and my children. I want to live in a diverse country.
Could you vote for Marine Le Pen?
I don't know. I need to think about it. She's right about a lot of things like unemployment and immigration. In France, we have no jobs. Nothing left.
Well, meanwhile, the debate over whether to abstain or not is playing itself out on social media.
It certainly is. If you ask French people, or indeed here in the newsroom, a lot of people are seeing on their social media this debate about whether or not to abstain. It's actually a very emotional debate. You can see here, for instance, people in favor of abstaining, the hashtag sans moi le 7 mai, so without me on May 7th, the day of the second round. You can see this person comparing Le Pen and Macron. One is the pest, the other one is cholera, comparing hate, finance, nationalism, neoliberalism. As you can imagine, some people are outraged by this kind of thing. I pulled out a tweet, for instance. You can see this guy saying, to think that in certain countries, people die to have the right to vote. And here some people are thinking about abstaining in the second round. So you can see this real debate online. Perhaps people will be encouraged to vote by these new campaign posters that were unveiled yesterday. So you can see them here. Quite a lot of similarities. Their party's movement isn't on the poster. They've chosen the word France in there. They're both wearing blue vests, but that's about where the similarities end for these candidates who are really polar opposites.
Absolutely, diametrically opposed, the two candidates going into round two. Thank you very much for the Campaign Beat. And that's all we have time for, but you can check out this episode of Campaign Beat on our website at france24.com.